The average person forgets 70% of new vocabulary within 24 hours. Not some of it. Not half of it. 70%. Gone. And the worst part is, most language learners have no idea this is happening to them. They study for weeks, they feel like they are making progress, and then they sit down to have a real conversation, and the words simply are not there. That single statistic explains why millions of people give up on language learning every single year. But it does not have to be your story. In the next 10 minutes, you are going to discover exactly why your brain discards new words so aggressively, what the science of memory actually says about vocabulary acquisition, and the specific techniques that allow some learners to absorb vocabulary 10 times faster than the average person. There is one method in particular that sounds almost too simple to work, and yet the research behind it is overwhelming. Most teachers never mention it because it completely contradicts the way vocabulary has been taught in classrooms for over 100 years. Stay with me, because this changes everything. To understand why vocabulary learning fails for so many people, you need to go back to 1885. That is when a German psychologist named Hermann Ebbinghaus conducted a series of experiments on himself, memorizing thousands of nonsense syllables and then testing how quickly he forgot them. What he discovered became known as the forgetting curve. His data showed that without any reinforcement, memory drops to about 58% after just 20 minutes. After 1 hour, you retain less than half. After 24 hours, you are down to about 30%. After a week, almost nothing remains. This was not a study about language learning specifically, but its implications for vocabulary acquisition are profound and deeply uncomfortable. Because the way most people study vocabulary, reviewing a word list once, maybe twice, runs directly against everything the forgetting curve tells us about how memory actually works. The traditional approach to vocabulary learning looks something like this. You encounter a new word. You write it down in a notebook or add it to a flashcard app. You review it a few times over the next couple of days. And then you move on to new words, assuming the old ones are locked in. But they are not. Without a very specific kind of reinforcement, your brain treats those words as irrelevant data and systematically clears them out. Your brain is not broken. It is actually doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is protecting you from information overload by pruning anything that does not seem important or frequently used. The solution, then, is not to work harder. It is to convince your brain that these words matter. Here is the first technique that genuinely accelerates vocabulary acquisition, and it comes directly from Ebbinghaus himself. He did not just discover the forgetting curve. He also discovered the solution. He called it spaced repetition. The idea is simple but powerful. Instead of reviewing a word multiple times in a single session, you review it at increasing intervals over time. The first review happens after 1 day. Then 3 days. Then a week. Then 2 weeks. Then a month. Each time you successfully recall a word, the interval grows longer. Each time you fail to recall it, the interval resets. This approach works because it forces your brain to retrieve information just as it is about to forget it, and that active retrieval is what strengthens the memory trace. Studies published in the journal Psychological Science found that spaced repetition improves long-term retention by up to 200% compared to standard mass practice. That is not a small improvement. That is a transformation. But here's what nobody talks about. Spaced repetition alone is not enough. The spacing is about when you review. But there is a separate question about how you review, and this is where most learners leave enormous gains on the table. When you look at a flashcard and see the translation on the back, your brain is doing a very passive kind of processing. Recognition is easy. Production is hard. And production is what you need when you are actually speaking or writing. Research from cognitive psychologist Robert Bjork at UCLA shows that the most effective form of review is not recognition but active recall, forcing yourself to produce the word from nothing, with no hints, no multiple choice, no partial cues. This is called retrieval practice, and it creates what Bjork calls desirable difficulties. The harder it is to retrieve a word, the stronger the memory becomes when you succeed. So what does this look like in practice? Instead of reviewing flashcards by looking at the front and flipping to the back, you cover the answer completely and force yourself to produce it. You speak it out loud. You write it in a sentence. You connect it to something you already know. This single shift in how you practice can double your retention rates with no additional time investment. That is not a metaphor. That is the result of controlled studies conducted at Washington University in St. Louis, where researchers found that students who used retrieval practice retained 50% more material after 1 week than students who used standard review methods. Now let us talk about context, because this is the insight that separates casual vocabulary learners from people who actually achieve fluency. Your brain does not store words in isolation. It stores them in webs of association, sounds, images, emotions, situations, and stories. When you memorize a word by rote, divorced from any meaningful context, you are storing it as a weak, lonely data point. But when you encounter a word in a story, in a conversation, or in a vivid example sentence, you give your brain multiple hooks to hang that memory on. This is why children acquire vocabulary so naturally. They do not study word lists. They encounter words in rich, emotionally engaging contexts over and over again. Research from Dr. Stephen Krashen at the University of Southern California supports this through what he calls the input hypothesis, the idea that language acquisition happens most efficiently through comprehensible, contextually rich input, not through explicit memorization. Practically speaking, this means you should prioritize reading and listening in your target language at a level just slightly above your current ability. Every time you encounter an unfamiliar word in a natural context, your brain is not just logging the word itself. It is logging the scene around it, the emotional tone, the surrounding vocabulary, and the grammatical structure. That is 5 times more memory data per word compared to a flashcard in isolation. And when those same words appear again, which they will, in any well-chosen reading material, the reinforcement happens naturally, without any extra effort on your part. Here is another dimension that almost no vocabulary course mentions: the role of emotional engagement in memory formation. Neuroscience research from New York University shows that the amygdala, the brain region responsible for processing emotion, directly enhances the encoding of memories in the hippocampus. In plain terms, you remember what you feel. Words that you encounter during moments of surprise, humor, curiosity, or genuine interest are encoded more deeply and retained far longer than words you study in a neutral, distracted state. This is why picking content you actually enjoy, not content you think you should study, is not a luxury. It is a strategy. If you love cooking, study vocabulary through recipes and food culture content in your target language. If you love crime dramas, watch them with subtitles. The emotional investment is doing real neurological work. Putting all of this together, the fastest vocabulary learners do 4 things consistently. They use spaced repetition systems to schedule their reviews optimally. They rely on active recall rather than passive recognition during those reviews. They immerse themselves in contextually rich input at a slightly challenging level. And they choose content that genuinely engages them emotionally. None of these techniques require more time than standard vocabulary study. Most of them actually require less. What they require is intentionality, a deliberate decision to study smarter rather than harder. The research is clear and the path is well defined. Before you go, if you learned something valuable today, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Lang Bridge for a brand new video every single day. We will see you in the next one.